When I read Twitter comments of basketball coaches, I'm often struck at how adversarial the relationship between player and coach appears to be within basketball players. Just reading a number of tweets, it just seems like basketball coaches have a very low opinion of players, and in a lot of cases, don't like teenagers and don't appear to really like coaching. And that's just the sense I get from reading a number of tweets, and then also having worked at a number of camps with coaches who did nothing but complain about the players that they had to coach. Last week when I went to a university track and field practice, the contrast between team sports and individual sports was great. Individual coaching, or coaching with an individual sport like track and field, it's a lot more cooperative. The athletes appeared to have a lot more control over their environment, and there wasn't the same kind of discontent that there often is in team sports. And some of that is, somewhat unavoidable. In basketball, you have 12 players, you only have 5 players you can play. So there's always going to be some discord between the way the players view their playing time versus the way the coaches view their playing time. Whereas, a track and field coach can put 3, 4, 5, 10, athletes in an event and can coach all those athletes like they're the star player. Whereas a basketball coach can't coach all 12 players like they're the star player, because not all 12 players can get, 38 minutes a game, or in high school, 32 minutes a game, whatever. So there's certainly different constraints that dictate some of the differences to the environment. But so much of it, to me, is just the way that we approach our coaching and think about coaching, and what we kind of view as good coaching in terms of, the discipline and the order, that we expect out of a practice or a team, which is much different than the environment that I saw at a track and field practice, where, an athlete would take a jump, and then they'd sit around for 7 or 8 minutes until their second turn for their next jump, and they were checking their phones or walking around, laying down, just kind of behaviors that would cause a team sport coach just to go nuts. So it's just a completely different environment, and in a lot of ways the individual sport environment is a lot more like the relationship between basketball players and their individual trainer. In a lot of cases, you will see that players have better relationships with their trainers than they do with their coaches. And oftentimes this is put as, well, the trainer is better than the coach, which I don't think it is at all. It's different. It's the same reason why college players tend to like their assistant coaches better than their head coach. Their assistant coach isn't the one not putting them in the game. An individual trainer, let's say, has 20 clients. Well, he can treat each and every client like the best player on the team. That can be his or her, star pupil. For that hour of an individual lesson, they get 100% of that trainer's attention. Obviously, they're paying directly for that, so it's a business transaction, and in many ways can be looked at as an artificial relationship. But whereas a high school coach, let's say, who has 12 players, maybe 15 players on the team, and an hour and a half to 2 hour practice, can't give an hour of undivided attention to a single player. And also has to hurt a player's feeling by not playing a player in a game, or whatever the case may be. So the team coach ultimately has much more responsibility and many more areas where there can be disagreement than with the trainer. The trainer essentially gets the easy part of the job. They get to work in an individual situation. They don't, determine playing time. So they're always the good guy in that relationship, whereas the high school coach often becomes the bad guy, because they're the ones saying, no, you don't get to start, or no, you're not playing 30 minutes a game, or no, you're not taking a shot every time you want to. Whereas a trainer can say, yeah, take that shot. Yeah, let's practice this move. Sure, you want to work on that? Yeah, we can work on that. Yeah, we can do dribbling drills for 35 minutes because they're fun. Whatever it is that allows that relationship to build between trainer and player. Whereas in some instances, it's harder with a coach. Now, that doesn't absolve a team coach. It shouldn't provide an excuse for a team coach. Ultimately, a team coach wants to develop the same type of relationships with players that a trainer has, or that a coach in an individual sport has. I'm simply acknowledging that there are, inevitable constraints that can affect a relationship that are beyond the player or the coach's control, namely playing time, starters, things like this that aren't a constraint for a trainer or in many individual coaching situations. In some individual sports, coach is limited in how many they can put in an event. You look at U.S. swim team, you can only put 3 swimmers in an event. Well, if the U.S. could have put 5 in some events, they probably could have had the top, 5, or certainly had 5 make the finals, but they're limited to 3. Same thing, track and field, in some of the events, both for Jamaicans and Americans, they could probably put more than 3 that would qualify for a final, but the rules limit them. So, in the U.S., you go through the trials process, so it takes that decision making away from the coach. So the coach doesn't have to be the bad guy, but theoretically, if it was more like a team sport environment, the track and field coach could just be picking, the 3 athletes to go. A little bit like what happens with the relays and why there tend to be more hurt feelings with the relay team in the Olympics than there is in simple, individual sports. Because that's the closest thing to a true team component within an individual sport. So again, just acknowledging that there are differences, but in a team sport, again, I see these tweets from the coaches with such an adversarial relationship, and I don't think it has to be that way. I think if you're, preemptive before a player is not going to play, then you can solve some of those problems. I go back to when I coached my first team in Sweden. I had 2 players who were very discouraged because the previous year they had totaled 19 minutes for the entire season. The previous coach completely ignored them, and they had no opportunities, and they were very dejected. And so I basically told them, I said, look, if you prove to me that you deserve playing time, I will play you. And so that motivated them. And then, I spent a little time with them, and I said, look, you need to do X, Y, and Z. When you do X, Y, and Z, I'll give you minutes. Then once you get in the game, then how you play in the game is going to dictate, whether you get more minutes or less minutes. And they did it. They started to practice more after practice, and they were motivated because they trusted that I would do what I said, and ultimately I did, and I gave them their opportunities. And so they were motivated to practice more. They were motivated to do all the things that we would like players to do because they trusted that I would follow through. And if I did see them practicing more and I did see them, accomplishing X, Y, and Z, that they would play. And so I followed through, and that built their trust even more because I did what I said I would do. And so we had a good relationship. I think, with the previous coach, they had a horrible relationship because they just felt like the coach never gave them a chance. And it didn't matter what they did, the coach had his favorites and he was going to play his favorites. And then, so they didn't work as hard. So then the coach could say, well, you don't work as hard, so that's why you don't play. And it's kind of a circular argument. The players are blaming the coach blames the players. And that's what I see in these tweets from coaches. Just this adversarial relationship building, and going in this circular thing. Coach blames player blames coach, so coach blames player more, and player blames coach more. And it's not getting anywhere, and it's not helping a team, it's not helping the player, and it's not helping the coach. So hopefully we can take a little bit from the way the relationships that individual trainers develop, acknowledging that they have a little bit of an easier job because they don't have to determine playing time or starters, and a little bit from the way the individual coaches have more a relaxed atmosphere. They really empower their athletes. The athletes certainly have some control, a little bit more responsibility for their own their own technique, their own event, their own training, their own coaching, seeking out the feedback, as opposed to always being yelled at by a coach, which is more typical in a team sport. So I think all these things can help to facilitate a greater relationship between players and coaches, and to kind of get rid of this adversarial relationship that I see building through tweets and social media.